Hi, the SI meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, December 14th. Well, as most would suspect here in the Mid-Atlantic region, we've been way above normal for the first couple of weeks of December, anywhere from plus 2 degrees at Reagan National Airport in D.C. to more than 4 degrees above normal for the first couple of weeks of December at Central Park in New York City. Well, believe it or not, one area of interest to predict if there's a potential temperature pattern change here in the eastern U.S. is to monitor what goes on at the North Pole. The usual situation over the North Pole, at least in the upper part of the atmosphere, in the stratospheric section of the atmosphere, is for a polar vortex to exist right about over the North Pole or very close to the North Pole. So meteorologists can look at this part of the atmosphere, and there are forecast models that actually predict if there can be a change in the polar vortex in the stratospheric part of the atmosphere over the North Pole. In other words, that low pressure system could weaken or even can lead to a reversal to a high pressure area. And that type of change often leads to colder temperatures here in the eastern part of the U.S. There are some indications now that such an event, which is often referred to as stratospheric warming event, may occur over the next couple of weeks, and this could lead to colder weather here in the Mid-Atlantic region around Christmas time or shortly thereafter. Well, let's take a look at the latest situation over the North Pole. This is the very latest temperature analysis, and the North Pole itself is situated right here, and you can see there's a rather typical polar vortex very close to the North Pole at this particular time, with the center of the cold air right over or just near the North Pole. Now let's jump ahead 10 days from now. Here's what happens. It actually shifts quite a bit, and you can see the change in this forecast from the current situation right here to 10 days later. And again, the North Pole is right in this region here, so the polar vortex actually shifts across the pole onto the Asian side of the North Pole. Some warming actually infiltrates near to the North Pole, creeping in from the west. So again, this potential change in the shift of the polar vortex to away from the North Pole over the next 10 days may actually foretell the potential of colder weather here in the eastern part of the U.S. around Christmas time or shortly thereafter. In fact, you can see right here on this particular forecast model the temperature change here. Here is the eastern part of the U.S., relatively normal pattern with colder weather as you move to the north. But look what happens in 10 days. That colder air actually moves certainly more so into the eastern part of the country as compared to what we're seeing right now. Now, another way to look at this potential pattern change here in the eastern part of the U.S. over the next couple of weeks is to look at the 500 millibar part of the atmosphere throughout the U.S. This is the current situation, and the orange here in the eastern half of the nation represents kind of an upper level ridge, whereas the blue over the southwestern part of the U.S. represents an upper level trough. Basically, the trough leads to the colder temperature pattern, and the oranges here lead to the warmer temperature pattern, and that's what we've experienced for the past couple of weeks. Again, this is the current situation in the middle part of the atmosphere over the U.S. Well, now I'm jumping ahead 10 days to take a look at what the GFS model is forecasting for the 500 millibar pattern in about 10 days or so, Christmas time. And here you have almost a complete reversal with the blues now, the trough in the eastern part of the U.S. and the ridge off the west coast of North America. Again, the flow now here from the northwest following these lines here brings the colder air from the upper part of Canada, the western part of Canada, into the eastern part of the country. So in other words, this particular model is supporting the possibility of a shift in that polar vortex leading to a colder pattern around Christmas time here in the U.S. Finally, I'd like to show a couple other models just to show further support for a potential pattern change here in the U.S. This is a Canadian model for 10 days out, and it has similarities to the GFS model here, 500 millibars, with a large trough here in the eastern part of Canada, extending down in the Great Lakes region of the U.S. Again, look at that pattern flow here, northwest winds blowing into the eastern part of the country, a complete reversal of what we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks. And here's yet another model, the no gaps model, 10 days out, indicating again a cold trough here in the east with the warm ridge up along the west coast, cold air penetrating now from the northwest to the southeast here in the eastern part of the country. So the bottom line here is there certainly are indications that things may change over the North Pole in the stratospheric part of the atmosphere over the North Pole over the next week or two, which could lead to a considerably colder temperature pattern here in 10 days or so around Christmas time or just beyond here in the eastern part of the U.S. We'll, of course, continue to monitor this at the SIweather.com over the next several days. That's it for now. I'm the SI meteorologist, Paul Dorian.